I started in late autumn, when the daylight shrank and the hospital lights felt like they were doing the real work. My badge still smelled like the lamination machine. I was the new night nurse on 7 East, a medical floor that always had a few telemetry beds and a lot of patients who refused to sleep. I told myself I liked nights. Less visiting family, fewer committees, more breathing room. The truth was, I needed the shift differential. My rent had jumped, and I was already splitting a studio with my cousin. On my first shift, the charge nurse, Maya, walked me around the unit with a paper map someone had highlighted in yellow years ago. The hall floors were waxed to a dull shine. We passed the nourishment room, the med room with its keypad that stuck if you were gentle, the clean utility closet that never had enough IV poles, the dirty utility that always smelled faintly like standing water and bleach. The linen cart squeaked whenever it moved. The printer near the station jammed on the same corner every time unless you slapped its side. 2 things about nights, Maya said. 1, the phones ring with worse news than during the day. 2, the building is older than you think. Things that don't make sense, let them be until morning unless they're bleeding. She said it with a smile, but there wasn't much joke in her eyes. People on nights carry a constant tired, the kind that smooths out their faces. I took report from a day nurse who chewed gum and flipped through the chart with fast fingers. She rattled off neurochecks, post-op orders, sliding scale insulin, and who could walk to the bathroom versus who would try and fall. I wrote it down and nodded and asked the usual questions. For the first few hours, I thought it would be fine. My patients were restless but stable. One of them, a man named Garrison, had COPD and a voice like gravel in a glass jar. He carried an air of permanent complaint even when he was asleep. He was in 723, a corner room with a window that looked out at another wing's blank wall. Around midnight, the hospital shifted. It does that every night. The day people clear out, and then the noise drops, and the air feels hollow. The overhead paging changes tone. The building takes these deep breaths you can't hear, only feel in the vents. The maintenance folks roll big gray carts down the main halls like shadows pushing shadows. I made my rounds and scanned meds into the computer. The barcode gun worked for once. Jenna, the CNA, helped me turn a patient who groaned but thanked us after. We cleaned him, changed the sheets, smoothed him out like a fresh page. He fell asleep with his mouth open, and the pulse ox blinking on his finger like a tiny lighthouse. At the end of the aisle, behind a double set of fire doors that were supposed to be magnetized open but weren't, there was a short hallway to a study room. It had vending machines, a coffee maker that made coffee nobody liked, and a table with a gouge where the formica had been peeled back. The windows looked down into a courtyard where nobody went. There was a triage station in there that no one used except for flu season. One of the computers in that room never logged out no matter how many times we lectured the day shift. Someone had taped a note that said, "Log off please," to the monitor, and the tape had turned brown at the edges. I went in around 1 to grab a sandwich from the machine and watched the orange spiral snack thing turn twice and drop my dinner with a thump. On the way back to the unit, my vocera chimed. The voice said in that emotionless hospital voice, "Rapid response, 7 East, room 712. It wasn't one of mine, but on nights everyone becomes yours when there aren't enough hands. Maya and I met eyes and went together. The rapid cart squeaked and Jenna pushed it like it weighed nothing. The patient in 712 was a woman in her 60s, Post-op bowel resection, low blood pressure flagged by the computer. We checked her, raised the head of the bed, adjusted her fluids. The hospitalist on call was a guy in sneakers with a pocket full of pens. He ordered labs. We drew blood by the dim light, sealed the tubes, labeled them with the labeler that always misprinted if you went too fast, and sent them in the pneumatic tube. As I pushed the canister into the tube, it sucked it out of my hand with a little burst of vacuum. You could follow the tube line along the ceiling to the main shaft. It always made me think of old lungs. The results came back normal. We chalked it up to the monitor reading low, adjusted some meds, stayed there until she pinked up. When the rapid response ended and the adrenaline faded, I realized my hands were trembling a little. It happened sometimes, more when I was new. "Go take your break," Maya said. "You looked like you need it." I went to the study room again. The vending machine lights hummed. I sat at the gouged table and ate the sandwich. Someone had left a crossword book with a short pencil. There was a soft sound above me. I thought it was the air. Then the overhead voice, that flat tone, clicked and spoke. "Code blue, sub-level, OR recovery." I froze. Sub-level? OR recovery? Our hospital had 2 sub-levels, but one was mechanical only. The other had radiology on one side and the old OR wing on the other side that had been closed for renovation since before I was hired. I thought someone mispaged. It happens. Except the tone repeated. The words were clear. Code blue, sub-level, OR recovery. I grabbed my radio and stepped into the hall. Maya was already at the nurse's station, phone to her ear, brows drawn together. Security passed by, Carlos in his navy jacket, the keys on his belt sounding like loose coins. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "We all heard it," she said, still on hold with the operator. "They don't code to a closed unit." Carlos stopped. "Or recovery is closed," he said. "Has been for months." The overhead voice spoke again. Same words, same tone. "Code blue, sub-level, OR recovery." It's the kind of thing that pulls your bones around. You respond. We know that sound and what it means. Even when it doesn't make sense, you move. "Operator says it's a glitch," Maya said finally. "Something in the paging matrix. They're working on it." It kept going anyway. Once a minute. It was like an itch you couldn't reach. I tried to ignore it and finish my medication pass. Every time I scanned a pill and watched the green checkmark appear, the code page would click and talk again. Some of the older nurses didn't even look up. They said things like, "It's that again," and "Facilities will fix it by morning," and "Last week it was labor and delivery calling overhead in Spanish to a nurse who retired 5 years ago." Hospitals hold on to old things. Badges worked on doors long after people quit. Outdated order sets lived in the computer like ghosts. Names came up when you typed, but the person wasn't there anymore. We joked about it. We had to. The alternative was to think too hard about what an old building accumulates. At 3? No, sorry. At some time deep enough into the night that the clock numbers didn't help. Maya told me to take another break. "You're doing fine," she said in a tone that told me she was saying it to quiet me more than to tell the truth. So I went to the one place I could turn off my head, the back stairwell. The elevators were fast, but the stairs cut past all the chatter. The stairwell was concrete and steel, and at each landing there was a little square window, with wire mesh in it that looked like a postage stamp of the outside. At night, those windows showed black glass. On the landing down one level was a steel door with a badge reader that never lit. The little strip of paper in the holder still said, OR staff only. Someone had drawn a smiley face on the paper where a name might go. The smiley was scratched out with a pen. I knew I wasn't going through that door. I'm not curious like some people are. I'm the kind of person who says, that's a boundary. Good. I stood there and felt the cold air coming through the seams, a temperature that wasn't from our HVAC. I turned to go back up when my radio crackled. Not a voice. A flurry of static that popped and then cleared. The LCD screen flashed. Signal lost. That happened in the stairwell sometimes. The concrete ate the signal. When I came back to the unit, Jenna met me with raised eyebrows. You got Mr. Garrison calling for you, she said. He won't say what he needs, just says your name. I went to 723. He had the covers pulled up to his chin, and his face looked older than earlier, folded in on itself. You rang? I said, trying to be light. What can I get you? There's breathing in the vent, he said. I glanced at his room vent. It was one of those square grids, dusty. You could hear air sometimes. Our vents were noisy. We've got the fan going, I said. It's the winter cycle. No, he said. It's breathing. You're hearing the airflow. He shook his head, small movements like he didn't want to make the sound move. It stopped when you came in, he said. You want me to sit a minute? I said, because sometimes that's what you do. You sit and they close their eyes, and the night moves past them. He watched the vent like it might move. I'm not afraid of dying, he said. I've had the oxygen for years. I know what's what. But I got no truck for someone else's lungs in my room. It wasn't that I believed him. It was that he was sure, and his voice made my skin remember the cold stairwell. I pulled a chair over and sat. We listened. Air moved. It didn't sound like breath. That's the thing. When you work on a floor with sick people, you know the sound of breathing, like you know your own. I counted the flow in my head. Regular. Drier whir, not chest rise. Do you want something to help you sleep? I asked. We can do melatonin. No pills, he said. He looked toward the hall. Just do your work and come in again later. It stops when you come in. I'll check on you more, I said. On my way out, I met the RT, Lee, who was doing his vent checks. He's the kind of guy who looks like he lives in his hoodie, and the hoodie lives here. He winked at me and tapped the oxygen tank. You surviving? He said. I will, I said. Hey, is the old OR down in the sub-level still closed? He shrugged. If it's open, I didn't get the memo. Why? I told him about the overhead pages. He smiled more with one side of his mouth than the other. They got weird wiring down there, he said. When they built that wing, they didn't hook it into the same trunk. There's 2 different panels. When one hiccups, it echoes. I've seen it. He saw my face. Don't worry, he said. If somebody's coding down there, it's a mannequin. No real patient. I nodded like that made sense because it did a little. But then my scanner chimed a low battery, and when I turned back toward the station, the computer on the counter flashed a window and logged me out. I swiped my badge. The system took a long time to think. Then it logged me in as a user that wasn't me. It said, in letters I didn't recognize, staging. The name field had a string of numbers. I backed out and tried again. My name came up. I clicked into my patient list and saw 7 names. Then I saw an 8th. Macready Elisabeth. No room number, just a tag in the notes column that said ORREC. There is no ORREC. Not in our system. Not now. On night shift, you learn that if you tell people every strange thing you see, they'll stop listening to you very quickly. You pick your moments. I picked nothing and moved on. The name Macready Elisabeth sat on my screen like a typo. I set my scanner back into its cradle and ignored it on purpose. I went to check on the post-op again. Her blood pressure was normal now. She asked me what time it was, and I told her the truth. It was the part of night that doesn't have a name. A transporter came for a patient who needed a CT. His cart knocked the door frame and the patient swore in a hoarse voice that made the transporter apologize 9 times. I healed the skin behind an ear with a little bit of barrier cream. A man down the hall kept hitting his call light and then forgetting what he wanted. His wife had gone home hours ago, and he kept telling me about the dog they had when their kids were little. It soothed him to tell it. I listened. Outside his door, the overhead voice paged another code to the sub-level OR recovery. I went back to the study room to heat soup. The microwave was a little too strong. It always boiled the edges first. I watched it turn and thought about how many people had put soup here. How much salt was in the air. Someone had left a post-it note on the coffee maker. Scale is broken. Don't trust the 4. The sticky had collected a halo of dust. The study room computer chimed. The log off please monitor woke itself. I watched the mouse cursor slide on its own. It made a little circle and stopped. That's not the kind of thing that frightens me. Old optical mice do that. Some surface reflection. It kept moving. It went to the EHR icon, clicked. That made me stand up. I walked closer. The login page opened. It entered a username that I don't know, one that looked like random letters. It paused, and then it entered a password field, 1 black dot at a time. I said out loud, because hearing my own voice helped. It's probably some remote help desk thing. I don't even know if we have that, but I said it. The screen blinked and then a patient list loaded. The facility field in the corner said OR Recovery. The list had 3 names. The top one was Macready Elisabeth. I reached for the mouse to wake it into my control. As soon as I touched it, the screen froze. The cursor ignored me. The computer hard-locked. I hit Control-Alt-Delete and nothing happened. I pulled the plug, because sometimes that's the fix. The monitor went black. I stood there and watched the blank screen like a dummy. Then my vocational badge pinged and the overhead voice paged the code again. I went back out because empty rooms make me feel more alone. As soon as I stepped into the hall, there was a sound from the far end where the fire doors weren't holding. Not a bang. Not the 3 taps people always talk about in those internet stories. Just the quiet squeal of a magnet re-engaging. The doors that had been ajar were now held open again. Someone had fixed the magnet. The hallway looked too long, like someone stretched it. "Do me a favor?" Maya said, not looking up from her phone. "Grab a new box of 18 gauge from supply." I was glad for something practical. The supply room lived near the service elevators. I took the old key, not my badge, because the supply lock was always stubborn, and opened the door into the air that always smelled like corrugated cardboard. The fluorescent light flickered, warmed, came on. I walked the narrow aisle, past boxes of foam dressings, coils of suction tubing, those ridiculous shower caps, the rows and rows of chooks stacked like blue and white bricks. The 18 gauge was on the top shelf. I reached for it, pulled one down, and something behind it skittered. Not an animal sound. The shelf shifted against the wall with a sound like someone dragging fingernails across paint. I froze and then laughed at myself. I looked behind the box and saw a note taped to the wall. "If found, please return to ore," it said in thick black marker. Underneath it, a key was hung on a screw. It wasn't our key. Ours were a set, on a ring, in the charge drawer. This was a single brass key with a red plastic cap. The red cap was dirty, like it had been handled by a lot of different hands. Someone had written "recovery" on the plastic in pen that had mostly rubbed off. I should have left it on the screw. If I were telling this story correctly, with the right caution, I would write that I put the key back and told Maya, and that security took it. I took it. I put it in my pocket without thinking why. Because it was wrong where it was. Because whatever the broken wire in the overhead paging was doing was going to keep drilling into my head until we made it stop. Because there was a name, Macready, Elisabeth. And the part of me that always believes the patient first couldn't file it under glitch yet. On my next set of rounds, I passed the back stairwell again. The OR staff-only door's badge reader glowed red. It didn't glow earlier. I took the key from my pocket and swallowed. I pressed the key into the old lock beneath the badge reader. I shouldn't have. I know. But I did. It turned. The lock gave with a smoothness that felt oiled. I opened the door a little. The smell came first, metal and cool, with an edge of old antiseptic. The light beyond was dim, like it was powered by a different grid. I looked back up the stairs. Everything above was the warm, yellow, normal light of our floor. Everything below was gray, a different saturation. I stepped inside a little, just a toe into cold water. The door closed behind me with the soft pull of a door that's weighted correctly. My badge signal went dead. The air didn't move the same. The hall beyond ran straight and then turned. The walls were painted a color I only see in older parts of the building, a green that makes you think of spearmint gum and old nurses' uniforms. There were signs still on the walls. PACU 1 to 4, anesthesia workroom, staff locker rooms. The arrows pointed like they meant something. The ceiling tiles were stained in places, old leaks mapped like continents. I told myself, "You're just going to look. You're not going far. You are going to see that there is no one needing help. Then you are going to go back upstairs and put the key back where you found it and pretend you did none of this." I rounded the corner. On the left, a window into a recovery bay showed me a row of gurneys stripped to their mattresses, plastic-wrapped cords hanging like vines. Paper signs said dates from months ago. There was no hum of machines. The shadows looked like they were waiting, but not for me. In the second bay, one of the monitors was on. Green lines, but no leads attached. The screen showed a sinus rhythm as neat as a textbook. It had no source of signal. It beeped, a sound so sweet and regular it made my chest ache. I stepped in and the automatic door stuck halfway and scraped, protesting the idea that anything automatic remained. On the counter, someone had left a stack of charts, the old paper kind we don't use anymore. The top one had a sticker, Macready, Elisabeth, and underneath, a date that was intact. The year was 2 years ago. The age listed in the corner was 34. I don't know why the age sharpened everything. 34 is an age that is not supposed to die here. Not usually. I opened the chart. Inside was a printed OR checklist, consent forms, a pre-op note, a medication list, an allergy to latex highlighted in yellow. The handwriting on the nursing notes was tidy, controlled. The PACU admit note was half filled and then stopped mid-sentence. The last written words were, "Patient arrived via OR gurney, Al," as if a hand had lifted. I checked the next page. Blank. I heard a wheel move in the hall. No rhythm to it, no squeals like in movies, just the honest turn of casters over painted concrete. I put the chart down very carefully. I stepped into the hall. A gurney had moved a foot from where it had been. Nothing more. Aside from that, everything was as it had been, except my head felt like I was at the edge of a tunnel with wind. I told myself to go back. Then another overhead page sounded, but this time it wasn't the building voice. It came from a single ceiling speaker down here, and it was wrong, full of static like someone tuned a radio between stations. It still said the same words. Code Blue, OR Recovery. The voice wasn't electronic modulation. It was someone trying to talk through the old PA, and it didn't have that crisp recorded cadence. It sounded like a person with a cold trying to speak into a bad phone. I remembered my job then, the one I'd come here pretending to do. I hit the code button on the wall out of dumb habit. The button clicked without any satisfying light. It made no difference. I looked for a phone. There was one mounted on the wall with a spiral cord. The handset smelled like old plastic. I picked it up and there was no dial tone. I found a red phone in the anesthesia workroom. It was dead too. I checked my radio. It showed searching. I went to the stairwell door and tried the handle to see how much work it would be to get back to the place where the light didn't feel like underwater. The door opened. I should have gone, but a patient's name can be a chain. Macready, Elisabeth. Pulled me another 15 steps. The recovery room had bay numbers in plastic frames. Bay 3 had a curtain that was half drawn and caught on its track like it had been jerked. On the bed was a folded blanket. Under the bed, a shoe. Single. Black with a sole that had peeled a little at the front. I nudged it with my toe and a sticker came off from the bottom and stuck to the floor. The sticker said QAOK in faded red. I moved into Bay 4. The monitor there showed nothing. The leads were coiled on the bed like sleeping snakes. The rolling stand holding the blood pressure cuff had a dried brown smear near its wheel that I couldn't name and didn't want to. A useful smell filled that bay, like betadine and body heat. It had no source. It made the hair on my forearms lift. There was a noise behind me. Quiet, not aggressive, but there, like exhale through a narrow place. I turned fast enough to make the blood pressure cuff sway. In the reflection of the monitor, I saw briefly a figure. I can't sweeten that for you. I saw what we all call a figure when we don't know what we saw. It was roughly the shape of someone in scrubs, cap on, mask around the neck, hair tucked. It projected presence the way a person does when they stand still to be measured. When I spun around, there was no one. The bay opened to the hall, and the hall was empty. "I'm a nurse," I said out loud, which sounds stupid when I write it, but I needed to remind myself I wasn't just a body in a place I didn't belong. If someone needs help, say something. I stood there long enough to feel silly. I backed out and moved toward the staff lounge. Inside was a table with a microwave older than me, and lockers with slats where people had hung stethoscopes. One locker was open. Inside was a white sneaker and a half-empty bottle of water with an expiry date long gone. On the wall was a corkboard with flyers for holiday potlucks, a wellness seminar, sign-up sheets with names, some crossed out. I ran my finger over the dust and then wiped it off on my pants like I'd been caught. A sound rolled through the ceiling like a cart moved on a floor above. It made no sense. Above ore recovery was the main lobby, marble floors and the volunteer desk. No carts there at night. It sounded like a cart anyway. My body responded to the sound before my mind did. I was already walking back to the stairwell door when I remembered I hadn't put the chart away. It felt weird to leave it open. I went back to Bay 2 where I'd left it. The chart was shut. I hadn't shut it. The sticky tab that said code on it had been pulled forward like someone was about to flip to that section. I didn't pick it up. The world narrowed to my hands. The handle of the door. The key in my pocket. I left. I went back up into the stairwell, where the air immediately felt wrong in the opposite direction. Too warm, full of all the human breath I'm used to. I locked the door behind me because that's what you do with doors that open to places that don't breathe right. "Where'd you go?" Maya said when I got back. "I need those 18 gauges. I handed her the box and said, "The old OR recovery still has signs." She blinked. "Why do you know that?" "Security left the door open," I lied. "I wanted to make sure it was closed." She narrowed her eyes. "You hate conflict and love following rules," she said. "Don't go down there again. That wing is under construction. You fall, you get stuck, you eat a piece of rebar. You're going to make me fill out a near-miss form." "I won't," I said. We had a quiet hour. The building must have gotten bored of paging itself because the overhead stopped calling the sub-level. The lights hummed the way they always do. The phlebotomist with excellent eyeliner came and drew labs. The floor smelled like coffee and hand sanitizer. The printer jammed and I slapped it, and it started working again. I went to check on Mr. Garrison. He was asleep, his chest rising like he was carrying a load he'd gotten used to. The vent in his room made a hollow, soft sound. I listened, and it was air. Ordinary air. On his bedside table was a photo of a woman in a sun hat with 2 kids, all cut off at the waist like the picture had been hastily cropped. It had a crease like it had been folded long ago. When I stepped back into the hall, something was on the floor, right at the threshold of 723. A strip of paper. It was a patient label. We spill those sometimes, and then they get tracked everywhere like fallen leaves. This one said Macready, Elisabeth, in our font. The same age, same MRN that had been in the paper chart. I picked it up. It was sticky still. I looked down the hall to see if someone had left a roll of extra labels out. The counter was clear. There was no one walking with a stack of charts. The label stuck to my glove, and then to my mind. I went to the computer at the nurse's station. The monitor woke. The EHR showed I was still signed in because I was now terrified of the system logging me as someone else. My patient list looked normal. I clicked the facility drop-down. There's no OR recovery option there. It wasn't a place the EHR thought existed. I went to the search bar where you can search for a patient by name. I typed MAC. Autocomplete offered 4 names: Machine, McLean, McPherson, and then Macready. It filled in the rest when I hit the down arrow. I clicked. The chart opened. It said deceased. The date of death matched the date in the paper chart. The top of the screen had a pale gray band with a notice that said, "This chart is archived. Read-only access." The tab still worked. I clicked Events. The list of recorded events showed a code event. I clicked it. The note read, "Code events commenced. Time: resuscitation efforts per ACLS. Patient ceased respiratory effort after return of spontaneous circulation. X1 failed. Time of death declared. Time by anesthesia attending." The details were typed. The nurse signature field was blank. The note had been closed by system error recovery. "What are you looking at?" Jenna said, leaning over my shoulder. I clicked back to the unit list. Checking my labs, I said too fast. "You okay?" she asked. "Sure," I said, and my voice didn't sound like mine. I logged out and back in 2 more times for no reason. It's a tick when you feel watched. I threw the sticky label in the sharps bin like that would make it mean less. At some not time after that, the fire doors at the end of the hall closed. You could feel it more than hear it. A change in air pressure. A little pop in your ear like elevation. The magnet is supposed to hold them open unless there's a drill or a signal. When I looked, the green lights above them were off. The hall beyond looked blocked, like the hospital had decided we weren't allowed to walk all the way down anymore. "Facilities," Maya said when I pointed. "They're probably testing the system." Something about that answer was both correct and not. The overhead voice picked up again. This time it paged not a code, but a bed assignment. It said, "Post-op or recovery to 7 East Bed, 723. I stood and waited for it to repeat. It did. "Post-op, OR recovery to 7 East Bed, 723. "That's Garrison's room," Jenna said. "No transport order is in." I checked the computer. No new orders, no telebed request. The EHR showed nothing coming up. I looked into 723. Mr. Garrison was awake, his eyes on the vent. He said, calm like someone who has made a choice, "There's breathing again." I went in and clicked on his bedside computer to check his vitals. The monitor said what I expected. O2 sat in the low 90s, not worse than usual. Respiratory rate high teens, pulse steady. He stared at the vent, not at me. "You want me to sit?" I said. "I want you to shut the other door," he said. He didn't mean his room. He meant something else. As if I could close the vents themselves, or the path I had opened voluntarily and now felt was open from both sides. I told him I would do what I could, and I meant it in a literal way. I walked to the thermostat and made the room warmer because it made people feel safer. I shut the bathroom door. It was nothing, but it gave the illusion of controlling space. On the way back to the station, I stopped at the stairwell and pressed my ear to the OR staff-only door. The cold of the metal went through my skin to the bone. I heard something that sounded like a voice speaking in a room far away. Not words you could follow, a rhythm of speech. It made me think of the way recovery nurses keep up a stream of talk when they're waking a patient. "You're okay. You're waking up. You did great. Deep breaths, that tone. A tone like that spoken to an absence. I went back to the supply room because I couldn't stand the little empty space behind that one box anymore. I put the key back where I found it, on the screw under the sign that said, "Return to ore." It felt like returning a weight I had taken and carried wrong. I stepped back and looked at the shelves like the hospital might reward me with a feeling of being back in the real place. It didn't. The air in supply has a way of smelling like you could get buried in it. When I came out, Carlos from security was at the end of the hall with his radio up to his mouth. He gave me a look that could have been either, "You're fine," or "Don't ask." He lowered the radio and said, "We got a maintenance alarm from below. Pressure differential." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means the doors on sub-level are opening and closing," he said. "They shouldn't be." "Glitch," I said. He smiled without humor. "Everything is a glitch until it's a report." I wanted to ask him to go down with me. I wanted to say, "We should check if someone is hurt, and also, I have already been there." Instead, I said, "Do you ever feel like this place puts words in your mouth?" "All the time," he said, surprising me. He looked down the hall at the closed fire doors. "Don't go chasing it," he added. "That's how people get weird. The building likes people who chase." I went back to work. Working is the antidote to superstition. I changed a dressing on a knee, and the patient gripped the bed rail and swore softly, and then said sorry to me as if I were the one suffering. I pulled a bag of lactated ringers from the top shelf and felt safer holding it than holding any key. The overhead voice didn't page again. The fire doors opened. Someone from housekeeping buffed a stretch of floor and backed the machine into its closet again, eyes half focused because it was so automatic. Dawn has a sound in a hospital, not the sun itself. The shift gears, the way the monitors feel less loud, the way morning labs come in, the way everyone seems to remember their own names. The first light shows up in the courtyards and makes rectangles on the walls. I finished my notes and signed my tasks. I told myself I'd sleep fine when I got home. Then, as I was about to give report, my phone buzzed with a system message. "Your note has been edited." I opened it to see which one. It was my nursing note for the rapid response at the start of the shift. It now had an addendum at the bottom, stamped with my name, the right time, with text I hadn't typed. Transferred to 7 East Bed, 7:23. That wasn't true. The woman in 712 had stayed in 712. I pulled up her chart. No transfer orders. My addendum sat there like I had put it there on purpose. I checked the audit trail, the part of the EHR that shows who touches what. It logged the addendum as mine. It even showed the device name where it was entered. It was the log off please computer in the study room, the one that had died when I pulled the plug. The audit trail said it had been powered back on at some point after that, and then the addendum entered by me, at an hour when I had been in someone's room cutting their sandwich into triangles. The audit trail is supposed to be the fixed thing in a world where everything else is slippery. I felt something give underfoot. "Ready?" Maya said, carrying her coffee. Bright, like day exists for her in a different way. "In a second," I said. I tried to delete the addendum. I couldn't. Read only now. It had been finalized. I put the handful of printouts in order and took a breath that didn't go as deep as I wanted. Report with day shift is a ritual, You tell stories that are technically factual, but always colored by what kind of night you had. I gave them the facts. I didn't tell them about the sub-level. It didn't sound like something you say with the sun up. After report, Jenna bumped my shoulder. "Get some sleep," she said. "We'll see if the ghosts left us any surprises." "Don't start," I said. She grinned and then it faded. "You okay?" she asked. "You look like you forgot a step." "I think I picked up something I shouldn't and put it back," I said, which was true and not helpful. I walked to the elevator with my bag heavy on my shoulder. At the last second, I hesitated and took the stairs. The idea of standing in a metal box while the building moved me without me pushing my own muscles didn't sit right. In the stairwell, the air tasted like concrete and coffee. On the landing where the OR staff-only door lived, I didn't look at it. I looked straight ahead and counted steps like they were worth something, and I went out through the badge-protected door onto the main floor lobby. In the lobby, there's a glass case with pictures of the hospital through the decades. Nurses in white caps with sharp corners. A picture of the groundbreaking with shovels and suits. One photo had an OR suite from the 90s, all clean lines and steel, with a recovery area in the back and bays with numbers. In the far corner of the photo, you could see a woman with her back turned, head turned a little, mask off her face, her profile almost but not quite clear. The caption said, "PACU staff during expansion." It had no names. I stood there with my badge around my neck and my brain running like a machine that had been left on all night, and my stomach thinking about bed. An elderly volunteer arranged brochures at the front desk like a card game. She looked up and saw me reading the photos and said, "My sister used to work down there," and pointed toward the ground under our feet. "Recovery," she clarified. She said it was like being in a submarine sometimes. "What happened to it?" I asked. My voice sounded like I had used it wrong. "They moved it," she said. "Everything moves. They closed the old one and built new upstairs. But you can still feel it when you walk. You'll see." She went back to her brochures. I went home and slept badly. When I woke up, it was dark again, and my phone had 3 texts from Maya. "Scanner fixed," one said. "Or paging issue resolved," said another. The third had a photo attached. It was of a small stack of labels on the station counter, rolled like a tape. The top label said, "Macready Elisabeth." Her text said, "Do you know why this printed on the main printer?" I stared at the photo until the feeling of someone reading over my shoulder became a weight. I typed, "No idea," and then deleted it. Because you don't tell the truth in text, not because you're lying, but because there aren't enough words to make it not sound like a stupid story. I put the phone face down. When I got to work that night, I told myself I would not. I would not look at the stairwell door. I would not check the study room computer. I would not look up any names that weren't assigned to me. I would do my job, breathe, wait for the dawn. I would not pick up keys that were not mine. I got my assignment. Maya's mouth twisted like she was trying to decide whether to say something. "You've got 719, 721, 723, 725, she said. 4 patients. It was a lot, but nights are like that. You okay with that many?" "I'm fine," I said. "Who's heavy?" "Mr. Grant in 719 keeps trying to take his IV out. His daughter left him with a tablet. He's watching concerts from the 70s and crying. He swears he doesn't need oxygen, but he does. 721 is your post-op knee. Sweet. Complains like an old engine, but okay. 723 is Mr. Garrison. 725 is stable. Sleeps all night like a miracle. Wakes up at dawn and wants to walk laps. He'll threaten to leave AMA for drama points, but he won't. Okay, I said. And the OR paging? Facilities swears it was a phantom page recorded in the Matrix, she said. They removed the old code stack from the system. She rolled her eyes. Like anyone knows what that means. Labels? I asked, before I could stop myself. They came out blank except for the name, she said. Print queue error. We tossed them. Okay, I said, as if that settled a real thing. When I went to get my first set of meds, the medroom keypad stuck again, and I had to hit it with my palm. The room smelled like alcohol wipes. The Pyxis had one drawer that always stuck. I pressed my thumb and watched it blink, think, and then roll a drawer open. On the top of the cabinet, someone had left a small pile of returned meds in their packages with a note. Return to OR Pharmacy. We don't have an OR pharmacy anymore. The note was written on a strip of double-sided tape, the kind you fix posters with. I took my meds out and pretended the label on the top of the pile didn't have a handwritten name. I pretended the handwritten name didn't start with Ma. In 719, Mr. Grant was watching a video of a stage lit in yellow. The singer's voice shook a little and then steadied. He had the volume too high. When I told him we were going to check his IV, he held out his arm like I could do what I needed while the song kept time. His daughter had left him with a note on the tray that said, "Text me if you need me. I don't care what time." He hadn't texted, I could tell. He had wrapped the tablet cord around his wrist like a tether. In 721, the knee patient had a frown that lifted when I made a joke about how our socks were cousins. He said the food was better than he expected. It isn't, but sometimes low expectations help. In 725, the sleeper slept. In 723, Mr. Garrison looked at the vent, and then at me, as if these were the only two objects in his world, the dark grate and me, the person who could change the value of the air. "He's not welcome," he said. "He?" I said before I could stop myself. "You go down there again?" he asked. I froze and then did an idiot thing. I lied. "No," I said. He nodded anyway, slow. "It follows the owned," he said. "You can pretend it doesn't. It will wait. It's patient. It's a hospital." "Try to sleep," I said, like that solved anything. I adjusted his oxygen, smoothed the blanket again. His hand shook a little when I moved the Pulso X sensor. His nails had nicotine stains that told their own story. He took my hand suddenly, and it startled me enough that I nearly pulled away. He didn't hold hard. He put my hand on the bed rail like he was teaching me gravity. "You feel that?" he said. The bed was vibrating. Not the big shake of a bed motor, not the rattle of wheels. A fine tremor like a train far away or a building sighing. A frequency you might not notice if you weren't touching metal. "It's the air handler," I said. "Maybe," he said. He let go. The vibration stopped. I don't mean it literally stopped because he released me. I mean I couldn't feel it anymore. He closed his eyes like a dog listening to a far whistle. I went out to the station and did what I do when I need to feel safe. I did tasks. I reprinted my labels. I reorganized my cart. I wrote in a pocket notebook I keep, because when the system crashes, you still need to remember insulin times. The pocket notebook has coffee ring stains and a list of phone numbers for departments and names of doctors who care if you pronounce their names right. I was writing nothing important in it. It helped anyway. The overhead voice paged Dr. Wong to MRI, and I felt stupid relief that it wasn't anything about OR recovery. I answered a phone call from a family member who wanted to know if their mother had had a bowel movement yet. I gave an honest answer and listened to them apologize for the question, as if it mattered. It matters. In hospitals, all the things no one wants to talk about are the most important things. A half hour later, I went to the study room for coffee I knew I would regret. The log off please computer was on, because of course it was. It had a login screen waiting for someone to decide it mattered. I stared at it. I didn't touch it. I made coffee and used too much fake creamer. I sat at the gouged table. Someone had carved initials into it with a pen tip and then panicked and scribbled over them with black ink. The door into the study room clicked open and Carlos stuck his head in. "You saw the maintenance alert," he said. "No," I said. "I try not to look at alerts unless they're ours." "Fair," he said. He hesitated. "You ever heard of a patient named Macready?" he asked, casual but not casual. I watched his face to see how much of a trap it was. "Why?" I said. "Someone keeps printing labels," he said. "From this floor." "Probably an old template," I said. "Those stick around." "Maybe," he said. He leaned against the doorframe and watched me not drink the coffee. "Don't chase it," he said again, "the way you tell a dog not to run after cars." "I'm not," I said, which wasn't all the way true. When I stepped back into the hall, the pneumatic tube whooshed and spit a canister into the station bin, as if to say, "Don't worry, real things still exist." I popped it open. Inside was a lab bag with nothing in it, and a printed label crumpled in the bottom. The label said, Elisabeth Macready. The first name now on top, as if someone had reversed the field. The MRN matched. The bag was clean. No blood, no tube. Just the bag and the label. I held it and looked around like someone would catch me and say it was a dumb joke. No one looked at me. The world continued to be the world, which felt like a trick. I should have thrown it out. Instead, I slid it inside a pocket in my bag. I told myself I was keeping it as evidence for later, when I could explain it to someone who would laugh and say, "It's the Q spitting old jobs." I told myself a lot of things. Jenna came up with the vitals. "Everybody's fine," she said, and then in a lower voice, "Your guy in 723 says there's a, what did he call it? A blocker in the vent." "A what?" "He says air is going around a person the way water goes around a rock," she said. She smiled like she knew how that sounded and didn't want to make it worse by laughing. "I'll look," I said. I looked. The vent looked like a vent. I climbed on a chair like an idiot and held up a flashlight that barely changed anything. A strip of linte hung, fluttered, and fell, and I jumped like a child and almost fell off the chair. "Don't break your neck," Mr. Garrison said. "I'll still be here." I got down. I wanted to tell him a story about how vents work, but sometimes patients don't want physics. They want you to say you'll stay close, and then to actually do it. So I stayed in his doorway, charting in my notebook to justify the time. and he kept his eyes half closed, like he was not quite sleeping. The tremor in the bed came back in my body, even though I wasn't touching anything metal. I felt like someone had left a small motor running in the room, something that would eventually run down, but not before doing something it was designed to do. My radio crackled again. Not static this time. A voice. 7 East, it said, and then nothing. An old male voice, the kind you hear through bad speakers. 7 East, copy? I lifted it and said, "Go ahead." No one answered. The screen said, "Signal strong," like a lie. Maya looked at me from behind the station computer. "You hear that too?" she said. "Yeah," I said. She sighed. "If we make it to the morning without the fire department showing up, I will be shocked. In the second half of the night, there is usually one event that rings the bell. A code, a fall, a patient you can't walk back from delirium. Tonight, the bell was a transport order that populated my screen. PACU to 7 East Bed 723. It came with a transport ETA of immediate. It had no ordering provider. The field was blank. The order type said legacy. I had never seen that word on an internal transfer order. "Call bed control," Maya said, reading over my shoulder. I called. The bed control clerk at night is a woman with a voice as precise as a scalpel. She said, "We don't have a PACU right now." "There's a transfer order," I said. "From where?" she said, and then before I could answer, "It says where from. I can see it." "It's wrong. It's a ghost order." "You can cancel it," I said. "It's not mine," she said. "It's coming from a unit that's been terminated." She paused. No pun intended. "I'll ignore it then," I said, trying to keep annoyance out of my voice and failing. "Good luck with that," she said. "It'll keep popping back up." It did. The PACU to 7 East Bed 723 order disappeared and then came back like a stubborn pop-up. It printed at the main printer twice, and Jenna tore it off both times and threw it away with motions that were too sharp. "Okay," Maya said finally, slapping her thighs. "Enough. I'm calling facilities to go down and look at the old OR, and then I'm going to ask them to give me a written something that says it's sealed. Then we can ignore it without feeling like monsters." "Take Carlos," I said before I could stop myself. She laughed. "You offering to babysit the floor?" she said. It was a joke, but also a question. We were short-staffed, and anybody leaving made the rest of us that much more threadbare. "I'm here," I said, because I was. She looked at me, at my face, at the way my hands were sitting on the counter like I was bracing against surf. "No," she said. "I'll go in the morning. Day shift can file the report. We're not playing Ghost Hunter at night." I nodded. Relief and disappointment tangled. Some part of me wanted someone else to see what I had seen. Some part of me didn't want anyone else to go down there. Those two parts pulled like a wishbone. The overhead voice paged once more, a different tone. This one the softer ding that calls a specific person to a phone. "Nurse." My name to the sub-level courtesy phone. I stared at the ceiling speaker like it could stare back. Jenna whispered. "Rude," Maya said. "Ignore it." The speaker dinged again. "Nurse, my name, sub-level courtesy phone." That was when the power dipped. Just a flicker. The lights didn't go out. The monitors didn't go dead. But you could feel the power lean away and come back, as if the building had shifted weight from one foot to another. The printer made that noise it makes when it wakes up with a start. The computer screens turned blue, and then back to charts. The hall might have widened by an inch. I felt impossibly lonely in that crowd of machines. I went to 723. "You still with me?" I said. He nodded without opening his eyes. The vent sound was steady. The bed was still. His chest moved and then paused a second longer than I liked, and then moved again. I listened without a stethoscope like an amateur. I wanted to hear the promised thing, the ordinary noise, but my ears wanted to make everything strange. I stood there until my timer went off for insulin on 719. When I stepped out, Carlos was at the end of the hall again. He lifted a hand to get my attention and then gestured toward the back stairwell. He mouthed, "You hearing this?" I walked down to him because if I didn't, I would have felt chased anyway. We stood by the door with the OR staff only sign. From behind it, a phone rang. Not the trill of a cell, not the megaphone of overhead. The ring of a hardwired wall phone, the kind that sounds like metal. It rang twice and stopped. Then it rang again. It had that timing that makes you want to reach for the receiver. I looked at Carlos. He had his palms up like, "See? You going to answer it?" he said quietly. "No," I said. "Good," he said. We stood until it stopped. It made a hollow that felt like someone had been denied. He shook his head once, and then we walked back toward the desk like civilians. A half hour later, transport showed up as if a real live human had read the ghost order and said, "Okay then." An older guy with a cart with a paper that said, "Pack you greater than 7E723. He blinked at the words like he knew they were wrong, and also knew how to do his job regardless. "You got a patient incoming," he said, cheerful out of habit. "No, we don't," Maya said, on the same tightrope between polite and not that I was on. He shrugged. "My board says bring one to you. Want me to go look?" He pointed his thumb over his shoulder toward the general direction of the elevators. "No," Maya said. "There is no PACU. You know that. Where are you going to get them from?" He looked at his paper like it might answer. "Sometimes the board, you know, it pulls old jobs." He scratched his cheek and then folded the paper once and tucked it in his pocket. "I'll go chalk it up to canceled and see if bed control reassigns me." We watched him leave. We listened to his cartwheels fade into the normal sounds. I felt like a line had been pulled tight across the floor between 723 and a place that didn't exist anymore. And everyone kept walking across it like it was just nothing. And it hummed every time their weight pressed it down. It was the last hour of the shift when everything small added up. The drawer that didn't stick stuck in a new way. The soap dispenser emptied and then filled itself like someone had swapped it while I blinked. The patient in 725 woke up and wanted to walk and came back rubbing his arms like he'd been somewhere cold. The study room microwave flashed 12 o'clock and then remembered the right time again. My pocket notebook fell off the counter when no one hit it. I picked it up and opened it and found a page. Not in my handwriting, not in any handwriting I recognize, with one line written in neat block letters. "Own your patience." There is nothing wrong with that advice. That's what you're taught. Own your patients. Keep track. Know their needs. Advocate. But it read different on that page. as if something had heard us say, "It follows the owned," and had decided to write it down as a rule I should be forced to obey. I tore that page out and trash-canned it so hard the bin tipped. "It's almost over," Maya said quietly, standing next to me like she had walked there without sound. "Go start your report notes." "I will," I said. "Don't take it home," she said. "And don't go looking for the boogeyman so you can meet him halfway." "I won't," I said, probably not convincing. "Good," she said. She handed me a styrofoam cup of terrible coffee, and I took it because having something to hold anchors your hand. As I turned back to the station, the pneumatic tube hissed one last canister down. It landed with a thunk. I opened it, because I cannot not open a tube. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the kind of thin paper we use for consents, folded twice. I unfolded it. It was a photocopy of a face sheet from a chart. Macready, Elisabeth. Address, insurance, emergency contact blank. In the corner, the date from 2 years ago. At the bottom, the unit. PACU. It had a faint black line across the bottom from a copier that needs a new drum. In the box where allergies go, someone had typed, latex. I turned it over. Blank. I looked at Carlos, who had drifted up to the desk like a boat. He shook his head, tiny. "Okay," Maya said, not looking at it, not looking at me. "Time for report." I slid the paper into my bag, because that's who I am now, apparently, the person who pockets things to avoid letting them be thrown away. I sat down at the computer to open my report template. The template loaded. The cursor blinked. In the comment box for 723, the words now sat there already, pre-filled, the way certain phrases sometimes auto-populate to save you time. PACU arrival pending. I stared until the letters stopped being letters. I hit backspace until the box cleared. I typed, "Stable overnight." No new complaints beyond baseline. I saved it. The box blinked. The words became, "PACU arrival received." My name sat under it like a signature, and the time attached was right now. Mr. Garrison's call light went on. I stood up. That is where everything around me pressed in at once. The building, the names, the night that pretends to end and then lifts its mask and shows you the same face. I told myself I could have turned around, gone home, left the second half for someone else. I didn't. I went into 723 to answer the call. And I swear to you, I heard someone in the bathroom running water, as if rinsing their hands for exactly long enough to follow policy. The sink shut off. The door didn't open. I said, "Hello?" And the voice that answered was not Mr. Garrison's. It was a woman's, tired, steady, the way you talk when you have done a thing too many times to be dramatic about it. She said, "I'm ready to transport." I reached for the bathroom door, and it opened toward me. I saw a woman in blue paper booties and a disposable cap. The mask hung from one ear. Her hands were wet like she'd just scrubbed and forgotten to dry them right. She had a hospital gown on, the thin kind with ties, and over it a warm blanket like they give you in recovery when your core temperature drops. A plastic ID band circled her wrist. It wasn't the bar-coded kind we use now. It was the old style with a hand-typed insert. The letters behind the cloudy plastic said, "Macready, Elisabeth." I didn't need to read it to know. Mr. Garrison looked at her and didn't startle. He went still in a different way. The muscle in his jaw worked once and settled. I'm ready to transport, she said again. To me. Like this was a handoff at the bedside, and we were two nurses, and this was the part where we exchanged information without making it bigger than it needed to be. Every part of me wanted to shut the bathroom door and call for help and turn the room inside out until it was a clean box again. But the way she waited made that impossible. It wasn't a threat. It was the same waiting I've seen on 100 faces who want out of the hallway noise and into a room where someone has said their name out loud and meant it. I heard my own voice answer before I decided to use it. Okay, I said. My mouth went dry around the word. Handoff? She nodded once. She spoke in the lean, memorize this tone we use because if we don't keep it simple, we drown. Post-op abdominal. Laparotomy converted from lap. 2 JP drains right lower quadrant. Foley in place. NPO. Pain controlled but complains of pressure. No latex. She lifted her wrist with the band and turned it so I could see the word allergy typed into the little white box. Allergic to latex. Vitals? I asked. Because that's what comes next. And because asking it anchored me to the floor. Stable, she said. And then she looked down at her hands like the word didn't mean what it used to. You'll want to watch the SATs, she added. She drops when she sleeps. Where from? I asked. The script calls for from PACU, but I needed to hear it. She tipped her head, the smallest angle of amused. Recovery, she said. From recovery. I could feel Carlos somewhere out in the hall, like a wall. I could feel Maya at the station, shoulders up the way they get when she senses we're going to be playing catch-up by sunrise. I could feel that if I raised my voice and said the wrong word, I'd tear a hole in something thin that was holding. What's your name? I asked, and hated that it sounded like I didn't already know. Elisabeth, she said, then corrected me without looking up. Elis, the way friends use it, the way you'd use it when you write it quick on a coffee cup. Okay, Elise, I said, and my mouth made the S soft. I didn't plan to. We can't take you here, I said in the same steady tone I use when a family tries to follow a patient to the CT scanner. This room has someone in it. She looked at Mr. Garrison. He looked at me. The air at the vent changed pitch like a yawn held back. He's not my bed, she said, not unkind. I was assigned this one. Assignments change, I said. We can... I stopped because I didn't know what we could do. I could not put her in a room. I could not put her on paper. I could not place her anywhere that counted in the building we use to measure what's real. We lost the bed, she said. The way you might say you lost a glove, and now one hand is cold. I'm sorry, I said. I meant it in a way that went wider than the room. It's okay, she said. You weren't here then. Mr. Garrison coughed. It sounded like gravel shifting. He kept his eyes on the vent. She's cold, he said flat. Give her a blanket. She has one, I said, which was stupid. And then I realized he wasn't looking at her blanket. He was looking at the kind of cold that makes your teeth ache. I took the warm blankets from the cabinet and shook one so it opened the way you do to get the heat into all the folds. I took a step toward her. She lifted her arms so I could wrap her the way you would at a bedside when the hallway's draft has found your patient again. The blanket settled on her shoulders like it had weight, and then pulled a fraction too far left. like hands I couldn't see, had taken the corner. She raised her chin so I could tuck it under her neck. It felt as normal as making a sandwich in the dark. It felt wrong, like I was dressing absence. "We have to take you back," I said. "Not to a room up here. We have to take you back down." She didn't argue. She did the opposite of arguing. She went patient quiet. The kind of quiet where people let you push their cart with 2 fingers because they are letting you do your job. "Don't chase it," Carlos had said. I thought it and said the opposite. "Come with me." Unsure who I was giving orders to. I checked my pockets. I had my badge. No spare key. The red-capped key was back in supply where it belonged. The stairwell door with the cold handle lived far down the hall past where the magnet sometimes failed. I didn't know how I thought I would get through it. I just knew I wasn't letting her move through this unit the way air moves when you open a window in winter. Not past 7:25 with his good morning lapse. Not past 7:21 with the knee they were finally not going to cut open again. Not past 719 with the crying over old concerts. "Stay put," I said to Mr. Garrison, like he was a runner you could anchor with a word. He snorted. He couldn't run to save his life. That wasn't what I meant. "Don't leave me alone with this," he said. Not the man in the bathroom, but the thing he couldn't name. "I'll be right outside," I said. "I'm not going far." He closed his eyes and nodded once, and the nod had the age of someone who has made a lot of bargains, none of them binding. In the hall, the lights seemed too bright. The overhead didn't page anything. People's footsteps sounded normal. I walked with Elise to the back stairwell and put my hand on the bar of the OR staff-only door without thinking I'd look like an idiot if it didn't move. The lock clicked, not the key kind. A sound like a magnet relaxing somewhere out of sight. The badge reader glowed for the first time since I started working here, except in a color I don't see on our current system. Not green, not red. A washed-out white like an old LED someone never replaced. I looked down the hall. Carlos stood by the linen cart like he was reading the labels on the blanket sizes. He wasn't. He was looking at me with the kind of face security makes when they see someone about to do something they can't endorse, but also can't stop. I lifted my hand half an inch and lowered it. He gave one slow, no-nonsense shake of his head. I went through anyway. The drop in temperature hit my teeth. The smell was different down there again, like old tape and cold metal, and the end of someone's breath after a long exhale. The lights buzzed at a frequency that wanted to live behind my eyes. Ellis walked like we were in a hallway at the end of a long day. Not floaty, not ghost movie weird. Just a gate that knew where everything inside hurt and had learned to step around it. "Bay 3, she said as if we could both see the numbers. I was supposed to be in 3. We passed the anesthesia workroom. The red phone on the wall didn't have a dial tone because there is no dial tone when you don't pick it up. Still, standing near it made my palm itch. We passed the window into Bay 2 where the monitor had been showing textbook rhythm earlier. It showed it again. Heart rate perfect. Blood pressure a neat set of numbers that felt like lying. The stand with the cuffs and thermometer had rolled a few inches to the left since last night. It's dumb what your brain notices to tell you the world has moved. In Bay 3, the curtain was half drawn again. The blanket on the bed was folded the same way. The bed had the imprint of a body, not in a way you could show to someone else. Just the way a lens smudges when a finger has touched it. Ellis stopped at the foot of the bed. Not like you stop when you're confused. Like you stop to let someone backing a gurney align the wheels without clipping your foot. I didn't make it out, she said. We kept thinking we would. Someone kept adjusting the oxygen. Someone said, "Give it another minute and then we'll go." There were 3 minutes. There were 8. We were past the transfer time. It was always almost. I put my fingers on the footboard to give them something rigid to believe in. The metal felt colder than the rest of the room. The plastic nameplate at the foot had no card in it. No bed number written in marker. Just a smear where a number had once lived and been wiped away with something that didn't quite cut the ink. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" I asked. I don't always ask. Sometimes asking makes people drag a net through water they'd rather keep still. But she was the one who had started the litany. She thought like she had a list in her head and was deciding whether to hand me part of it. We were going to take her up, she said, and her pronouns were a mix. Sometimes you slip like that when you talk about yourself in a place where your body was not your own. There was a hiccup. She stopped breathing for a little while, and then they brought her back a little, she said, but not enough for transport. Anesthesia wanted a minute, the surgeon argued. The nurse on the other side of the curtain said we should wait until the bed got changed upstairs because no one wanted to be the jerk who transports into a room that doesn't have the bed made. A laugh flashed through me like a cough. "We would have made the bed," I said. "You weren't here yet," she said, which was true in too many ways. I looked for a chart. The stack was still where I'd left it. The top one, the one with her name, was closed now with the big binder clip like it had been finished. I pulled it open. The PACU note still ended in mid-word. The timestamps on the code note had a gap that made me think of missing stairs. The signature line under Recovery RN was blank, but now it had a faint printing error black bar through it, like something under the drum had left a mark. I felt anger then, sharp and embarrassing. Not at her or at any single person. At the way systems let grief turn into noise and then call the noise a glitch. At the way we leave old signage up and say we'll take it down when we get to it, and then pretend the arrow that points to something that doesn't exist anymore is just quaint. "I'm going to finish your note," I said before my brain could stop my mouth. "I'm going to put my name on the line that says RN." It sounded like stealing. It sounded like a thing that would turn me into a fix for something I couldn't hold. She watched me with the calm of someone who has let other people do all the weird things they need to feel better. "Okay," she said. "Then you own it." I sat at the counter in that bay and took the chart and a pen from the cup that still had 3 pens in it for no reason, because no one uses this room, and also the pens are always there. I wrote like you write when you don't want to give yourself time to think. Patient arrived to PACU via OR gurney with anesthesia and surgical team. Attached to monitors. Oxygen via nasal cannula escalating to mask. Vitals as charted. Allergy to latex noted. JP drains X2. Foley in place. Pain assessed and treated per orders. Patient verbalized pressure. No acute distress. Continuous monitoring. Transfer to 7 East Bed 723 pending. I paused and let the pen hover. Transfer did not occur, I wrote. It looked wrong and right. Resuscitation efforts per MD team. No sustained return of spontaneous breathing. Time of death as declared by anesthesia. I rubbed my temple because I could feel a headache waiting. Family notified by surgeon and chaplain. Belongings secured. There were no belongings in the locker except the sneaker and the bottle of water that didn't belong to anyone. I wrote it anyway because the form wants lines filled. I wrote what I always write when I don't have better words. Patient remained in PACU until disposition. My name felt heavy when I wrote it. I printed the letters slow. I didn't sign in cursive like I do upstairs. Something about loops felt disrespectful. When I looked up, Ellis had stepped closer to the bed in a way that said she wanted to sit on the edge but knew better. She put her wet hand flat on the mattress and closed her eyes, forehead creasing for the first time. It was such a normal thing to do in that space. You watch people do it with a family member sleeping off anesthesia all the time. It didn't make any new noise. It didn't make the room sway. It just existed. Okay, I said again, because that word seems to open doors and close them with equal success. We're going back up the stairs. She withdrew her hand. The place where it had been on the mattress looked dry. I tucked the chart under my arm because part of me thought if I left it here, someone would put it back on the pile wrong. We walked to the stairwell. The door out into the unit above looked like life. I reached and pulled and went through into the warmer air that smells like coffee and the plastics cart and human shampoo. I didn't look back to see if she followed. Looking back felt like an invitation to make a choice. She came. The stairwell filled with the sound of soft booties on concrete. It's not a sound you'd notice unless you were trying to hear monitors hum less. When we stepped onto 7 East, the hall was not empty the way I'd wanted it to be. A phlebotomist rolled their cart past. A transporter leaned on a door frame, waiting for an elevator light that wouldn't change faster just because he was there. Jenna popped out of 721 with a used med cup in her hand, saw us, and didn't drop it. She didn't see what I saw. That's the only way I can write it without making myself a liar. She looked through the space where Ellis stood, and then at me and said, "You good?" Like she always does when she senses noise. "Fine," I said. "Did you need me?" 719 wants a graham cracker he can eat like it's contraband, she said. Also, the printer ate 2 labels, and I told it to go to hell, and now it won't print anything at all. "On it," I said. My voice sounded borrowed. We got to 723. The door was cracked open. Mr. Garrison's TV had gone to a channel that plays nature sounds and mountains you can't smell. He was awake. He looked at Ellis and then at me with a look that said a lot of unprintable things in a compact space. "Okay," I said to him, letting my voice go soft because barking would make it uglier. "This is for a minute. Just a minute." "What is it?" he asked. Not the what, the it. "A patient who never made it to her bed," I said. "We're going to let her sign in," I added, which was nonsense and also the closest thing I had to something that felt real. "She's cold," he said again, like a fact he wanted logged. "I know," I said. "We're going to make it warm for her, and then we're going to send her back." Saying it out loud made it sound like a plan, instead of a thing I wanted to be true. Ellis stayed by the foot of the bed. She didn't cross the line of the curtain the way some families do, even when you tell them it's okay. She obeyed the old PACU rule that belongs to places like that. Don't touch anything unless someone tells you to. Her eyes flicked to the monitor, and then to the oxygen, and then to the chart screen, and then to the IV pole as if taking inventory by habit. Do you want me to call anyone? I asked in a voice that made me feel like I was an actor in my own life. She shook her head. Her hand brushed the ID band and held there like a person fingers a ring when they haven't decided whether to take it off. I put the chart, the paper one, not the screen, in the plastic rack at the foot of the bed, the one that holds patient binders on floors where paper still exists. The moment the folder sat there, the monitor on the wall flickered and came to life. It didn't show our telemetry. It showed the PACU template. The nurse name field auto-filled with mine. The bed number read 3. The unit read recovery. The vitals showed steady, reasonable numbers that had no machine feeding them. Maya stepped into the doorway and took in everything the way her eyes always do. The position of the bed, the way my shoulders were curved, the way Mr. Garrison's mouth was set, the way my hands were trying to take up less space. She couldn't see Ellis. I know that because she did not make the face she makes when a family member is in a place we didn't expect them to be. She looked at me, and at the monitor, and back at me. "Is this a thing?" she asked, voice quiet. "Just for me?" "It is for now," I said. She took a slow breath that moved her collarbones up and down once. 2 minutes, she said. "Then I'm closing the loop with facilities and we're writing this up the most boring way humanly possible." "Okay," I said. She stepped back and stood guard, the way good charge nurses do. People passed the door and did not look in. The world of sodium levels and bed alarms and my phone charger is missing sent out little ripples that didn't cross our room. Ellis placed her fingertips on the side rail. I watched her watch the blankness where a blood pressure cuff would be. "It didn't hurt," she said in a voice that was more to the air than to me. Everyone always wants to ask that and never does. It didn't hurt in the way that makes a person afraid. It hurt in the way you know what it is, and you sign and you go. I nodded, even though that's not an answer you can chart. I was mad because I thought they didn't want me upstairs, she said without looking at me. "Isn't that ridiculous?" "No," I said. It felt like I had my shoes on and my bag on my lap, and they kept saying, "Just a second," she said. And then she laughed, and then the laugh turned into a soft shake of her shoulders that was a cry specific to people who have planned, and then had the plan delayed until it decided to be gone. I looked at the ID band. My hand moved toward it before I thought about it. Taking a band off is a thing you do at the end. I put my thumb on the plastic where it latches. She looked at me, and then at my hand. Her mouth made the micro-smile nurses make when a patient tries to help with a tangle of lines. "You sure?" I asked, and I heard my own voice go hoarse. She nodded. "Yes." I unlatched the band. It pulled like it didn't want to release. Then it gave. I slid it off her wrist. It sat in my palm heavy like cheap plastic that has been warmed by skin. I didn't know what to do with it. My pocket suddenly seemed like a hole I could drop things into and never see them again. I set it on top of the chart instead. It looked right there, wrong and right. "Thank you," she said. "Do you need anything?" I asked automatically, and she smiled for real this time, tired and human. "No," she said. "I have it." "Wait," Mr. Garrison said from the bed. It startled me because he hadn't moved or spoken since. We both looked at him. He was staring at the vent. "Before you go," he said to the vent, to the woman, to the air, to the building, "you tell me if this stops when you leave." She tilted her head so she could see him fully. "It will stop," she said. "And then it will start again when something else needs it." "That's what I thought," he said. He turned his head back toward the window that doesn't show anything but another wall. She stepped back from the bed, and then one step more. She didn't turn. People in hospitals don't turn when they leave. They back out like they don't want to turn their back on the person in the bed. She went to the door and paused next to Maya like two co-workers in a tiny doorway. Maya didn't move. She didn't have to. Ellis seemed to make room around her in a way I can't describe without sounding foolish. In the hall for a second, the light hit the plastic band on the chart and made a little flare. Then it dulled like old paper. I picked it up and slid it into the chart's inside pocket. I closed the binder. I wrote something simple on a sticky note and attached it. To be archived. The note made me want to pass out. It was such a small word for something that had eaten my night. 2 minutes, Maya said again in a voice that meant, now. I walked with the chart to the station. I didn't know where to put it. There is no box on 7 East that says, charts for non-existent units. I stood with it like a person with a tray of cookies they can't give away. Carlos came to stand at the corner and reached a hand out like a collector. I set it in his palm. He slid it under his jacket like something fragile in the rain. "I'll put it where things go that don't go anywhere," he said. It didn't sound clever. It sounded like a job he hates. I went back to 723. Mr. Garrison's eyes were closed. His breathing made a new sound I hadn't heard since this started. Not the vent, not the building, his own. Rough, but his. The room felt like the air had changed out in one go and reset. I adjusted his cannula a little because you do those small acts when you need to feel useful. He didn't open his eyes. "It stopped," he said. "I know," I said. "Thank you for not leaving me alone with it," he said. And I almost said, "I didn't." But I decided not to pick at what he meant. When I stepped into the hall, the hospital came back in layers. A call light lit 2 doors down because someone had discovered their water cup was empty, and the idea of thirst became urgent. The overhead paged a respiratory therapist to the ED. The printer unclogged itself for once and spit 3 labels like a dog shaking off water. The station phone rang, and the way Maya reached for it made me love her. Jenna yelled my name the way people yell in places like this because volumes belong to the architecture, not to anger. I worked. It was like someone had put the first domino back without anyone seeing. My brain moved into the grooves it knows. We gave insulin. We checked incisions. We hunted down a warm pack for 721's knee, and she said it was the best thing that had ever happened to her, even though it was just a bag of hot water. We convinced 719 to quit scratching the tape over his IV. 725 woke on schedule and walked his lap and came back with that little half smile people get when their legs remember they can. There were interruptions, because nights are interruptions. A lab result with numbers that didn't belong to any of my patients, but had appeared on my screen anyway. A visitor who had fallen asleep in a chair and woken cold and annoyed. A traveling nurse asking where to find more underpads because her cart had been raided by another unit. But it all felt like the shape of something familiar, instead of the edge of a thing I couldn't hold. The overhead voice did not page to sub-level again. The magnet on the fire doors held like a promise. The study room computer did not log itself in. The pneumatic tube sent the right blood to the right place, and did not give me an empty bag with a stranger's name on it. The maintenance page cleared from the small screen at the station. The only weird thing left was me. Right before dawn, when paperwork grows teeth, my note for the earlier rapid response pinged again. Your note has been edited. I opened it and braced. The addendum now had a line I did not write, stamped with System User, Archive Process. It said, PACU transfer order canceled. It wasn't language our system uses. It wasn't in our template. It read like something from a manual no one had updated. But the bed number was gone from the transfer field. The assignment field for 723 read, occupied, no from where. It sat on the screen like a small apology. Good, Maya said behind me, and I didn't know if she meant my face or the note. She handed me a piece of paper with 3 checkboxes highlighted. We're getting audited on consent forms today. Those 3 need to be perfect. Audited, I repeated, and she smirked at the face I made. The end of the shift has its own superstition. You don't say quiet, because the building has ears. You don't say, it was easy, because someone will code out of spite. You don't talk about sleep too much because the universe loves to take it away when you name it. We didn't say any of those things. We said normal things. You got anything for report? And I'll cover you while you run to the restroom. And do you want the leftover pudding from 721 because she swears she won't eat it? When report came, I told the day nurse the truth the way I could tell it. Nothing acute overnight. Watch 719's 4 because he's curious. 721 likes the heat pack. 725 walks early. 723 slept better than I expected. I said it in the rhythm of day, not in the rhythm of night. Day shift brought with it a smell of fried eggs from the cafeteria and the sound of people who use their voices more. Families, rounds, physical therapy with rubber bands. The building pulled itself upright like a person sitting up and rubbing their face. I logged out. I held my badge in my hand like a talisman and told myself not to look at the stairwell door. I looked anyway. It was just a door. The paper strip still said OR staff only. The smiley face drawn on it was still scratched out. The badge reader light was dead. On the way out through the lobby, I stopped at the glass case with the old photos without knowing I'd do it. The same picture of the PACU staff was there. The same corner with the woman turned so her profile almost wrote a name across the glass, and then refused to give it to you. It looked nothing like Elis. That's how these things work. You want the shape to match the story you've already told yourself. It doesn't. This wasn't a coincidence you could point at and win. The volunteer from yesterday was there again. Or maybe she never left because people like that seem to live inside the hours. She watched me watching the photographs. You work nights, she said, not a question. Yes, I said. She shuffled her brochures into a neat stack. You've got the look, she said. My sister always looked like she had a second set of eyes for the dark. She worked recovery, I said. Years, she said. Said it made her good at letting go of things and bad at letting go of other things. What things? I asked before I decided not to. Lists, she said. Names. She tapped the glass near a black and white photo of the wing being built, steel beams and braces like ribs. Walls. I went home and slept like my body had been unplugged and then plugged in again wrong. The dream I had wasn't even a dream. It was a list of supplies in the supply room, each box in its place, lined up with the printed labels facing front the way we were taught to do if we wanted the auditors to stop looking at us. I woke with the taste of glue in my mouth and the feeling that I needed to check a door. I told myself I would take a different route to the unit that night. I would come up the public elevators and walk the long way around the ICU and wave at the nurse there who always chews sunflower seeds and spits the shells into a cup. I did it. It made no difference. The unit smelled the same. The rhythm was the same. The assignment board had my name in the same place, even though the marker color was different. 4 again, Maya said, handing me the sheet. You okay? Always, I said, because the only thing worse than being honest in a hospital is being obviously not. Good, she said, because we have a guest. She pointed at the end of the hall. A woman stood by the visitor chairs with her arms wrapped around a purse like it was a toddler. She looked like she had already been told not to worry and had ignored it because that's what you do if you understand the fine print. She's here for the old OR, Maya said before I could ask. Facilities said somebody from the archives wants to see the sub-level. They didn't run it through me. Of course not. Can you point her to security so they can babysit? I looked at the woman. She had the exact kind of shoes you wear when you spend your life in basements looking through boxes. Her hair was up in a way that said, I didn't care what I looked like until I saw myself reflected in a window and remembered I exist. She smiled at me because she's nice. I felt sweat pop under my arms for no medical reason at all. I'll take her down, I heard myself say. Maya stared at me long enough to count. No, she said, the way you use that word when you want the message to get into someone's bones. I'll take her to Carlos, I corrected. Better, she said, but she didn't look convinced. I walked to the woman and introduced myself. She told me her name. It didn't matter for the story. She said she was here to pick up some boxes left by accident when they closed the wing, and she rolled her eyes because no box left behind is an accident. They finally answered my email, she added, triumphant in a small way that made me like her. I have a window of time to access the space. Let me get security, I said. They can escort you. We walked to the desk. Carlos met us like he'd been summoned by a string. The look he gave me said a lot about cause and effect and how one night changes the ramp under your feet. He nodded to the woman, polite. I'll take you down, he said. You too? He asked me, and he meant, are you going to insist on putting your body in front of this train you already rode? I have patience, I said, and the relief in my chest almost made me sit down. Good, he said. He clipped a badge with an old seal to the woman's sweater and walked her toward the elevator. They were gone for an hour. In that hour, 719 lost his IV, and we had to start a new one, and he yelled more at himself than me. 721 called her sister and cried without telling her why. 725 asked me if the hall looked shorter tonight or if he was taller. 723 slept, and his breathing made me feel like I had put one rock in the right place, in a stream that would flow whether I was there or not. When Carlos came back, he put a brown cardboard box with a broken side on the counter. For you, he said, from below. For me, I said, and he shrugged like a man who has stopped trying to prevent the world from making jokes. Inside the box were paper dividers you use for file folders, and a stack of printed unit maps no one uses anymore because there's an intranet. On top, in a clear sleeve, was a faded memo. The top line said, PACU Transfer Protocol, Interim. The date in the corner was from 2 years ago, the same month the chart said. The first bullet said, if bed on receiving unit is unavailable at time of transfer, document delay, reassess Q15, and escalate to charge nurse. The second bullet said, do not delay for non-clinical reasons, including linen, environmental services. The third bullet said, if patient expires in PACU, document as remained in recovery pending disposition. It felt like the building had printed a posthumous, we meant well. Under that was a face sheet, not a photocopy this time, the original. Macready, Elisabeth. Same address I'd seen, same allergy box. Someone had drawn a small heart next to the latex allergy with a purple pen like a joke you make when you are bored and your patient is asleep, and you will erase it later. It was still there. At the bottom, where recovery RN prints their name when they send the patient upstairs, there was an empty line. A sticky note had been stuck to the edge at some point long ago. It was now stuck to itself, older adhesive reluctant to let go. You could see the ghost of handwriting backwards on the paper. I pressed it gently with my thumb, and then slid the face sheet back into the sleeve because I didn't want to be the person who tears a thing that has already been torn once by time. Where did you find this? I asked. In a cupboard behind the staff lounge fridge, Carlos said. Don't ask me why. Because no one ever cleans behind the staff lounge fridge, I said, and he almost smiled. You want me to get rid of it like the others? He asked. He meant the chart he'd taken under his jacket. No, I said. I'll take this one to medical records myself. I didn't know why I wanted to. Maybe because I wanted to stand in front of the person who scans old paper and turns it into lines on a screen and say, please take this one like it matters more than it looks. Maybe because I wanted to carry something heavy and hand it to someone whose job it is to carry those things. Carlos nodded. He tapped the box with his knuckles. There was a label down there. It printed when we were there. The labeler had no power, I swear it. And then it spit one. He pulled it from his pocket. He didn't hand it to me. He held it up so I could read without taking it. It said my name. Not as a patient, as recovery RN. Then the word owner in a field that has never existed in our system. Throw that out, I said before my stomach could finish flipping. I will, he said, and I trusted him. Everything okay? Maya said, appearing with the way she appears, 3 things happening in her hands and her brain, and a kindness she hides under sarcasm. Yeah, I said. Archives trip. She eyed the box. Label those maps and push them out of my sight, she said. I don't want a fire inspector to think we're collecting combustibles. You are poetry, I told her, and she smirked. The day the memo arrived, the sub-level pages stopped for good, or at least they stopped for me. I don't know what other people hear when I'm not there. That's one of the worst parts of nights. It makes you think you are the spine of a building that holds itself up whether you're there or not. It's ego, and it's also the way you keep from getting crushed. Days went by. We had a run of pancreatitis that made the hall smell like bile even through closed doors. We had a man who coded twice and came back twice and then asked for pancakes. We had a nurse go out sick, and everyone picked up an extra half a shift, and all the jokes turned cheap and mean until we got sleep again and apologized without saying sorry. The world did what it does, went on. Sometimes I thought I saw a flash of blue paper booties on the edge of vision near the study room. Sometimes the log-off please note looked newer. Sometimes the supply room felt like it was breathing, the way buildings do when air moves through big ducts, and you're the only one who notices. I took the box to medical records. The woman behind the glass took it like it was exactly like all the others, and also like she appreciated the wait anyway. "We'll scan it," she said. "We'll make it real." I didn't correct her choice of word. I started checking on Mr. Garrison more than I had before. Not because I thought he'd be taken by something I could fix with my body being present, but because he didn't look at the vent as much, and it felt like a reward you don't get often. One morning, after a night where the room felt like a normal room, and not like a place inside a place, he said, "If you see anything again that doesn't belong to anyone, don't pick it up." "I won't," I said. And then 3 hours later, I fished a dropped medication wrapper out of the track of the bed, and he said, "That's not what I meant," and laughed for the first time. He died a week later, just before dawn. It was a good death, if you believe in that as a category. He had said what he wanted to say to the person who needed to hear it on the phone the evening before. He had refused a second blood gas and told the resident to take his expensive pen and write a novel with it. He had slept in the kind of sleep where people stop tensing their jaw. I was in the room. Jenna was in the room. We heard the kind of breath that isn't a breath, and then isn't anything at all. I put my hand on his wrist because you can't not do that, even when you can't feel a pulse on a wrist that's been cold for a long time. We did the things you do that are as sacred as any ceremony dressed up in fancier robes. We turned off the monitor. We called the doctor. We wrote down the time that is not anyone's favorite. We took the oxygen off and put it away like it would be used by someone else, and not like it had done its job and should be allowed to rest. When I left the room, I felt nothing chase me. That was the gift he gave me for sitting with the cold I couldn't fix. I kept working. Night shoves you forward because if you stop and admire the edge, you trip. One more thing happened. The last thing that ties the knot. It was a small thing that will sound like it means less than it did. I had a day off. I went to the grocery store in the daylight like a citizen. I stood in front of the cereal and decided it all tasted like boxes. I turned and almost walked into a woman coming the other way with a cart that had one squeaky wheel. We both stopped, did the aisle dance. "Sorry," she said, smiling tight like people do when they have 3 places to be. "And this is none of them." "No, me," I said. I looked at her and felt that itch you sometimes feel when a face tries to move around your head. She looked like dozens of people. That's the only fair way to say it. Most of us look like dozens of people. But the way she held the handle of the cart with one hand, and the way the other hand picked at the inside of her wrist, made me think of a time, a room, a plastic band that didn't come off easy. I said it before I thought not to. "Ellis." She blinked in a way that didn't belong to a woman in a store. Then she smiled. "No," she said, friendly. "I'm Alyssa." She laughed because it sounded like a joke we'd both made by accident. Clothes though, right? Right, I said, and felt ridiculous, and then noticed her hands. The skin where a band would sit was smooth. You can't tell anything from that. I told my brain to cut it out. I said, sorry, you look like someone I used to know. She nodded like she knew how that feels, and pushed her cart along, and the squeak got swallowed by the hum of refrigeration. I stood there and felt absurd tears burn the soft place under my nose. I wasn't grieving a ghost. I wasn't anything that would make sense if I wrote it on a form. I was tired, and the cereal all tasted like boxes. And I had taken ownership of something that didn't belong to me. And then I had given it back. And now my hands didn't know what to carry. I went back to work that night and the next and the next. Things went wrong in the way they do. Small leaks, broken printers. The very bad day when someone in 715 went sideways, and we all had to remember the steps with our bodies while our brains went white. We made it through. We lost people. We kept people. I watched a man relearn how to hold a fork. I watched a woman decide to try and then try. I watched a kid shave his father's face and not cut him. Once, months later, I was in the study room, and the log off please computer woke on its own, and the mouse drifted and clicked, and for a second my heart started to hammer like a fire drill. The login screen just sat there. Nothing else moved. The cursor blinked like a metronome. I didn't touch it. I made coffee and stirred it with a plastic straw because the spoons were gone. I left the room with the cup, and when I came back after rounds, the monitor was black again. The note still said, "Log off, please." Someone had traced the letters with a finger and left a trail in the dust. I have the face sheet copy in a file at home because I am bad at letting go of paper with names on it. It doesn't mean anything to anyone but me. It is not sad in a way that would make a decent story at a party. It's just a line with a name and an allergy in a box for recovery RN that is filled now in the quiet part of the hospital where scanners hum and someone eats pretzels at their desk and tries not to drop crumbs in the keyboard. My name is in the digital version where it will never matter to anyone who is not me. Sometimes I think about that line like it's a loop someone knotted, and I put my finger through it and pulled it tight. Sometimes I think it's nothing. Both are true. On some nights when the unit gets that hollow to it, I stand by the fire doors and listen. Not for breathing, not for a phone that wants my hand, for the sound a building makes when a place within it remembers itself and then forgets again. It's not scary when you expect it. It's a cycle, like everything else here. We take people in. We hold them a while. We send them somewhere else. We write it down so we can live with ourselves. We never catch every name. The ones we do catch sometimes don't let go. Sometimes we hear one whisper back and we do the paperwork anyway. We speak to it like a person. We tuck a blanket around a space, and we give a handoff we can stand by, and we say out loud that we are ready to transport, and we mean it, and we do it. And then the hallway opens, and we step through. That's the whole thing. There isn't a sharp end. I still work on 7 East. Maya still drinks coffee so strong it hurts your teeth to smell it. Jenna still steals the good pens and pretends she doesn't. Carlos still makes faces at the camera in the elevator. The printer still jams on the same corner. The magnet on the fire doors works more than it doesn't. Every once in a while, a label prints with a name nobody owns anymore. We scoop it up and throw it away like we throw away a lot of things in hospitals. because if we kept it all, we'd drown. Now and then, the label sticks to my glove, and I have to peel it off, and I catch a letter backwards in the adhesive that looks like an S, or maybe a 5, and I press it down hard in the trash and rub my fingers on my pants and go wash my hands for the 1,000th time that night. And I don't count to anything, and I don't wait for taps, and I don't announce to the air that I'm not afraid. I just do the next thing. I answer the call light. I scan the pill. I watch the chest rise. I make a note. I say the name. I sign my part. And sometimes, when the building asks for something simple in a voice that belongs to no one, I say, okay. And I put the blanket where it belongs. And I walk the thing back to where it can be archived. And I close the door behind me with my hand on the metal, steady and warm.